to stop the political warfare. They want us to come together and deliver on things that are incredibly important to them. And you heard also from the president last night say very clearly, look, the first 2 years, he was able to sign about 300 pieces of legislation that were bipartisan into law. So again, to answer your question, he's an optimist. He wants to continue to see what we can do. He's going to put his budget forward on March 9th and lay out how he believes the next 2 years should go as it relates to fiscal responsibility. And he had a meeting, as you all know, with Speaker McCarthy very recently. It was a very good meeting, an honest meeting. And their teams, our team and the team of the speaker are continuing to speak and have conversations. And he's called on the speaker to bring forth how he sees what their proposals are as it relates to the budget.
Tell us what his reaction was.
I don't have a meeting to lay out, but I could tell you that there's been conversations with our team and his team that continues to happen and occur, but don't have a meeting to lay out at this time.
What was his reaction to the GOP response, particularly Governor Sanders saying that he was unfit to serve and believing in woke fantasies?
So I'll say this. President did not get to watch the response in real time. If I remember correctly, the president was greeting with members of Congress long after the speech. You all saw that and covered that of you. And then he welcomed back the White House chief, he was welcomed by the staff and Ron and gave his goodbye. So he did get to see it in real time. We've talked about it with him. I've talked about it with him just recently. So the way that we see it is like the choices between political fighting over fake conspiracies and delivering for the American people. The president is focused on the latter, which is fighting for the American people, fighting for all Americans, delivering on lowering healthcare costs for working families, delivering to make sure all of our kids can get a good education and feel safe at school. And so a lot of folks may say those are, quote, normal. What is not normal is some politicians' obsession over some of our most vulnerable kids, or taking away women's rights to make their own healthcare decisions, or even teaching America's history. So if Republican officials want to come together and deliver on the quote normal, is what we heard last night, things that Americans actually want, and they want Americans want us to deliver it, right? When you think about elected officials, and they want the president also to deliver and continue to do more. So he laid out 4 areas just last night that we have already worked on, and he wants to continue, right? You heard him say he wants to finish the job that we've started.
Offended by the heckling? What did he think of the heckling itself?
Look, I think what you saw last night is a president that was very clear on how he sees the next 2 years. It was a president that talked about the progress that he's made the last 2 years. If you talk about the split screen, right, you saw that from the president, and you saw what the Republicans were all about, which is jeering and behaving in a way that, again, Americans don't want. That's not what they told us very clearly after the midterms what they wanted. So we know what approach that the American people want. We're going with the approach of continuing to deliver on key important issues. You heard him talk about 4 of them last night. And so that's going to be our focus.
Clear that Speaker McCarthy was sort of frowning behind him. Did you guys get?
I don't think he was not aware at the time of his delivery of the speech. I don't even know, he's been so focused on the, on the speech and greeting the congressional members. Clearly, as I mentioned, he saw staff and Ron Klain when he got back to the White House. So it's not something that I'm not even sure he's aware of.
Great. So one of the flashpoints last night was about Social Security and Medicare, with Republicans denying that they want to touch them or change them or eliminate them. The president sort of said, okay, well, we'll take you on your word on that. But does he now believe that to be the case? Does he trust that?
Just a couple of things that I just want to lay out. And we want to be very real here, because there are some facts that we have seen the last couple of years, not even the last couple of months, which is members of the Republican caucus have repeatedly for many, many years tried to cut Medicare and Social Security, to privatize it, raise the retirement age. They actually voted on that and put it on the chopping blocks. That's what we've seen them do for years. And they always try to speak out of both sides of their mouths. That's what they've done. Trying to cut these programs Americans pay into their entire lives when they think they can get away with it. That's what we're talking about here. Mike Lee, right, who protested last night, but there is literally video that I think your network showed this morning, Jonathan, saying he wants to tear Medicare and Social Security out by the roots. This is something that Mike Lee said. We are headed to Wisconsin, as I just mentioned, home of Senator Ron Johnson, which you heard the president talk about a lot during the midterms, who authored a bill to put these programs on the chopping blocks in Congress every single year. That's what he said. And they're on record about this. So what we saw last night was a president who called out members, right, as we're talking about jeering and how they were responding. He called out members out on live television in front of millions of Americans and effectively put them on the defense. That's what we did. That's what the president did. It's put them on the defense. And also, I just want to call out the CNN fact check that was backed up by the president, saying he was right in a way he described Scott's plan, because that was the pushback that we've been getting, and that many House Republicans have pushed for deeply slashing Medicare and Social Security benefits. No more saying one thing and doing another, right? And that's what they do. So look, we want to see their plan. We're still going to call out for their plan. That's what we believe. We're going to put our plan out on March 9th, our budget, and we're going to see. Let's see exactly what they want to do.
Follow. Is this a warning the president's still going to be making?
Say that last part.
Is the president still going to, despite last night, still going to warn the American people, like, hey, we can't believe them. They might cut this?
I think, like, as I just said, he put them on the defense, right? That's what he did last night, right? And he called them out in front of millions and millions of Americans who are watching. And that's what the president did. And what the president is going to say on his end, he's going to continue to fight for Medicare, to protect Medicare, to protect Social Security. And we have the facts of what Republicans have done for the past several years. They keep saying they want to cut Medicare and Social Security. They want to put it on the chopping blocks. And so he's going to defend it. He put them on the defense again last night, and he's going to call them out.
On that.
Yeah.
Also on Medicare, what is his proposal for extending the Medicare trust fund?
Not gonna get ahead of the president. As you can imagine, he's going to come out with a budget on March 9th.
Let's hear the question.
Yeah. You're so nice. You're so kind. But as the president said last night, it will invest in America, his budget, cut the deficit by $2 trillion by asking the wealthy and big corporations to pay their fair share, protect Social Security, and extend, as you just mentioned, Medicare trust fund at least 2 decades without cutting benefits. The president budget will have a full, transparent accounting for how we reach these goals. And so, again, I'm not going to get ahead of him. But we'll have that on March 9th. And again, I'll say, we want to see what the Republicans are going to put forward, what their plan is for the American people. But clearly the president gave a little bit of how he sees his budget moving forward.
I can't really hear, so I don't know if this was already asked, but has Marty Walsh spoken to the president at all about stepping down? And can you say anything about that?
I don't have any conversations to read out or anything more to share about Marty Walsh. Clearly, he is still today the Department of Labor Secretary. I just don't have anything to share on any personnel.
Any update on when we might see an announcement on NEC director now that we know Brian's leaving?
So nothing new to share on what the president has decided on who is going to step in once Brian leaves, Brian Deese leaves.
Really briefly, Medicare's trust fund is going to run short in 2028, and Social Security will exhaust its reserves by, I think, 2034. What's the president's sort of broader plan to deal with that?
So you kind of got that question just a second ago from your colleague, JJ here, and I don't want to get ahead of the president. He's going to lay out his plan, his budget very soon on March 9th. And so what we can say is he said it last night. He wants to cut the deficit, lower the deficit by another $2 trillion. That's going to be his focus. He wants to make sure that it's a fiscally responsible budget. And so you're going to see that from the president. Again, not going to get ahead of him.
Does it specifically address entitlement solvency?
I'm just not going to get into specifics, get ahead of him. I can just reiterate what he said, right? It's going to be what we have said, fiscally responsible. He's going to lower the deficit, continue to work on that. He'll have it on March 9th, and we're going to continue to call on Republicans to do the same, to share what their plan is for the American people.
I have questions. Yeah, I have a couple questions. First one, finishing the job, you mentioned that half a dozen times or a dozen times. You've mentioned it a couple times today. What does that actually look like given where things are? Like, what's the clear definition, and what does the job finished look like? And
I think it's, I think we've said it over the last couple of months, and I think the president had said it in his remarks, which is continuing to make sure we have an economy that's, I kind of said this, I've said this a couple of times. When you think about what the president has done with the economy, he's transformed how you grow the economy. We've always talked about, or you've always heard for decades about trickle-down economy. The president has transformed that. He doesn't believe in that. He wants to build an economy from the bottom up, middle out. And by doing that, you leave no one behind. He said this in his speech a little bit about how, his plan invests in people and in places that normally don't. And so you've seen that time and time again. If you think about the bipartisan infrastructure law, it does.
is that a 2 or a 6-year job for now? If this,
I see where you're going. So, as you know, I am covered by the Hack Act, and I can't get into certainly into any politics or the president's plan politically as we look at, or as many of you look at 2024. What I can do is repeat what the president has said over and over again, is that he intends to run in 2024. So I'll just leave it there. But in the meantime, he's going to continue the way that he sees it, continue to deliver for the American people, continue to make sure that there's economic growth and progress for the American people. 12 million jobs created under this president the first 2 years. 800,000 of those jobs were manufacturing jobs. You have wages going up. You have unemployment at the lowest that we've seen in more than 50 years. That matters, and he wants to continue that. He wants to do it in a bipartisan way, like we've done with bipartisan infrastructure legislation, like we did with CHIPS and Science Act and others. He talked about 300 pieces of legislation that he was able to sign into law and do it in a bipartisan way. That's what he wants. But again, he's going to continue to do the work for the American people.
one more question about the balloon. He took a pretty strong stance last night that taking down the balloon was no tolerance moving forward. Is that the stance of the United States? If any of these surveillance balloons come over the United States or get into our area, that we will be shooting them down moving forward?
You can't go into hypotheticals and speak to each case, because we just don't know. I think what you heard from the president is that he's going to put our national security first and the American people first, and that's what is important. And I'll just leave it as that.
We don't have any clear understanding about why the previous balloon was taken down versus this one. What made this balloon down more important than the previous one during his administration?
Look, what I can say is the president takes this very seriously when it comes to making sure we're protecting our national security and keeping Americans safe. We've kind of laid out very clearly this past week and how we approached this most recent balloon, and why the president asked the Pentagon to take the steps that they did, right? And so I just don't have much more to say on that. Don't want to get into hypotheticals from here. I would just refer you to what the president said very, very clearly last night in his remarks.
Oh, so yes, yeah, no worries. Did the president have any private time with Tyree Nichols' family?
That's a really good question. As you know, right before, I think at some point, before he goes to speak, he gets to meet he talks about it in his speech. He gets to meet with the folks who have been invited, with the family members who've been invited in the box. I can't speak to exactly what their interaction was, but as you know, they've had conversations in the past. The president talked about what Tyree's mom said to him, and he used it in his speech, and talked about what their conversation has been. Assuming that they had a little bit of time together. I just haven't spoken to the president about what
part of the George Floyd Act that the president is going to try to highlight now, given that part of the speech last night.
I think a couple of things here about the police reform. This is something that the president cares about very deeply. In the last session, clearly, he was involved in trying to get the George Floyd investment in Justice in Policing Act done, and it wasn't able to get done. Republicans blocked that in the last session, and so when that couldn't happen, the president took a historic step and took executive action by putting forth police reform that he couldn't do on the federal level. And so I think that shows how serious he was. Again, never been done before. He took a record, a record action, and as in doing executive action. And now going into this session, he's been also very clear. He wants to see the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act done. He wants to see bipartisanship on it. You kind of need bipartisanship on it to get that done, and that is a promise that he's made to Tyree Nichols' family and other families who have sadly suffered and having to deal with these devastating news of their loved ones being killed in that way. And so his team is going to continue to work with Congress. He's going to continue to call on Congress to bring a piece of legislation that is going to actually be transformative and do something that is going to hopefully change what we're seeing currently in communities that are being affected by that.
Is it true that the Chinese were using balloons to spy on Japan, Taiwan, some other Asian allies?
Something on that for you. So these balloons are all part of a PRC fleet of balloons developed to conduct surveillance operations, as you know, Steve, which have also violated the sovereignty of other countries. And over the past several years, Chinese balloons have previously been spotted over countries across 5 continents. We have been in touch with allies and partners on this issue. I don't have further details for you at this time, but we'll keep you posted and updated. A lot of this is diplomatic conversations that are happening, and that's something that the State Department, that's under the purview of the State Department. So any other further questions, I would refer you to the State Department.
Is the president going to bring this up with President Xi at some point?
So don't have a call to preview with President Xi, and I certainly don't have an agenda because there's no call to really speak to.
You said you wouldn't want to be Xi in their speech last night. Then,
I mean, I would just leave it as the way the president said it. I'm not going to go into, the mind of the president of what he said. I think the president has been very clear on his approach and our approach with China. It's managing a strategic competition with China. We're not looking for any escalation. What we're looking for is competition. So I'll just leave it that.
you don't have the intent of the line or what you guys were thinking.
I don't understand that. What did you say?
You said you don't want to go into his mind, but there's thought goes into all of these speeches and what was the maybe general
understand that. I'm just going to leave the president's word. He said what he said, and I'm just going to leave it there. I'm talking about our approach with China, and it's going to continue to be that approach. It hasn't changed.
The Republican House Oversight Committee has begun hearings today into the business dealings and laptop of Hunter Biden, the president's son. Will he be watching, and do you have any comment?
It's happening today. I mean, we're going to go to Wisconsin talking about the bipartisan infrastructure law and focusing on how, that piece of legislation, clearly that's now law, is delivering for the American people. That's going to be our focus today. I'm not going to get into any oversight hearing from here. That's something that clearly the White House counsel, my colleagues there, could answer more specific questions on that. Anything that's related to Hunter Biden, we always, as you've heard us say, refer you to his representatives. I'm just not going to get into it here.
A random one, but the president took out about a $250,000 line of credit on his house in Rehoboth late last year. Can you say what that was for, or whether it was?
Yeah, I saw reports on that. I would just refer you to the White House counsel's office.
We didn't hear a lot about Ukraine in the speech last night. Can you let us know if the president's planning to go to Poland to mark the 1-year anniversary?
Don't have a trip to preview for all of you at this time. As you know, our commitment to Ukraine has been steadfast for the people of Ukraine as they're fighting against a brutal war that started by Russia. And so, you've seen that with our security assistance that we've provided over this past year. You've seen that in the way that the president has been able to strengthen the alliance that we've seen, the partnerships that you've seen across the globe. And then we're going to continue to do that. Our commitment is very, very clear and continues to be clear. You saw that when President Zelensky was here, that we're going to help Ukraine defend and protect their country for as long as it takes. I don't have anything further.
You don't mind
China is now, a diplomat is asking for the recovered parts to be returned to China. Is there any conversation about that in the U.S. or what's your response to their request?
I just don't have a response to that. All right.
On the opioids, fentanyl part of the speech last night, there are some public health advocates who are a little disappointed. They say they wanted to hear more about the president talk more about treatment and other forms of treatment rather than penalties. Can you address their disappointment in what they've heard?
I mean, look, you heard last night a powerful call to action for Congress, for members of both parties to step up, come together, and fight the flow of fentanyl, which is something that you've seen from this president. And he said last night, we now have a record number of personnel working to secure the border, arresting 8,000 human smugglers, seizing over 23 pounds of fentanyl in just the last several months. And he understands we have more work to do. I think this is what part of the work that's so important is seizing the fentanyl as they're coming across. But this cannot be a political issue. It's a matter, really, truly, as we're seeing in communities, it's a matter of life or death. So that included additional actions to go after traffickers, tougher penalties, and also expanding access to life-saving treatments, which is what you're asking for and asking me about. But all of those things clearly are important. But what we saw from Republicans are jeers and casting blame, and Republicans could and they should come together to find solutions to tackle the same exact issues the president wants to tackle. And stop the flow of illicit drugs into our country and save American lives. So we understand treatments are very important. He spoke about one specific thing, and you've heard us talk about what we're doing at the border. But of course, treatments is key in also saving American lives.
And then one final question. We know the president is going to be home alone on Sunday. The first lady's going to the Super Bowl. Does he plan to
that many times?
Yeah.
Does he plan to invite any lawmakers? Governors will be in town for the weekend to, any sort of Super Bowl.
We just got through the State of the Union, so I think we'll have probably more to share about this Sunday. I just don't have anything at this time.
Is the interview that he's doing today with Judy Woodruff, does that in any way substitute for the traditional Super Bowl Sunday interview that a president does?
Say this: the interview today is very. It's not part or any part of Sunday. It's not any part of Sunday. It's just a standalone interview that he's doing.
Will he do an interview on Sunday?
I just don't have anything to share. We literally just finished with the State of the Union, so I just don't have anything to share on the next on this Sunday. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the trip to Ukraine by the president off the table at this point?
I just don't want to. I just don't have anything to share. We are looking, and I think we've said this before. We are looking to see how we're going to commemorate the 1-year anniversary. I just don't have any trips to share at this time, any travel to share at this time. So I'll just leave it there. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.